All right, everyone. It is Wednesday. Welcome to the ViaMonstra Academy office hours. My name is Johan. I will be your host for the next hour here. And this is where you can ask questions about anything related to MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, imaging, Windows in general. So, with that being said, simply let the questions come in. All right there. I am monitoring the feed here on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. For those of you attending the Zoom call, you can of course also ask questions here in the Q&A feature here in Zoom. So it means if I go over to this view here, should be able to see the screen somewhat. On the Academy, we have all the recordings from previous events, and this is also where we provide links, etc., that are being shared during each of the webinars. So on the Academy site, if you go to office hours, down here somewhere, yep, this is a simple way you can see and look at upcoming time slots for these and also watch the previous recordings. And of course, you also find them on the YouTube platform as well. We have a brand new, well, not brand new, it's a month old now, but we do have our YouTube channel, and it's the ViaMonstra Online Academy. And this is where you find not just these long hour office hour meetings, but we also have been cutting down some of the more popular questions into small breakout videos so that you actually can watch them as well if you want to. So these are like sort of the clip section here that we refer to. And that being said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And while we are waiting for questions to come in, I don't think anyone interested in the sort of Microsoft Endpoint Manager sphere missed that there was a new version of ConfigMgr released just a week or so ago. That is the week and a half ago, 2203 is in early release free. So that means that you need to opt into it to get it going in a lab environment. As usual, I do not really recommend that you put it in production just yet, but by all means, if you have a test environment, which you should, or lab environment, QA, pre-prod, whatever you call it, now is the time to get it going in that environment. And since there are no questions coming in just yet, I figured I can just mention a few of the changes that were in this release. The most obvious one is obviously that we finally have a pre-release of a dark theme that we can enable. So I've enabled that in my tenant, and that means that if I want to switch, I can simply go up to the file menu here and switch the console theme. It's going to ask me to do restart the console, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now I have a dark theme console, which I think looks pretty cool. Personal view, but I'm a big fan. Big fan. Other changes that made me excited in 2203 was that we now can force clients or motivate clients to use a CMG for a software update point. So you might remember for the longest time we had the ability when we configure our boundary groups, whatever they may be, and there you can say in options, you can say prefer cloud-based sources. This now also goes for the software update point if you have one. So this checkbox right here. Just be a little bit cautious. It will put some strain on your internet breakout. So make sure you plan for that. We actually had a few customers that enabled this and didn't quite realize how much traffic that would actually go over that internet link, and it turned out to be quite a bit. Other exciting features is on the software update point itself. I believe I have one here. We now have the option of, let me zoom in on this one, but we can adjust the download speed using LEDBAT, something that's been recommended to use for distribution points for the longest time for all of that type of content, but now also is on the software update point. I highly recommend to enable this one. You will find that it will be using that much better if this one is enabled. Prior to this being up in the console like this, you've always been able to do that through PowerShell because it's just a TCP template anyway that you can control that settings, but this is nice to get the checkbox in here. Other good stuff that came in 2203 is that you now can escrow keys in your sequences when you do have BitLocker management enabled. That was something that you always had the ability to do in the standalone MBAM solution, but Microsoft didn't add in until quite recently now in this release here in ConfigMgr. So good stuff there. What else? Well, they also added in some visualization for content distribution. That means that if you scroll down here and you have different type of content, you can easily see which distribution points that one has been available. There was a question coming in about can you share the link for your office hours? Absolutely. That one is not too hard. So on the Academy, this is the main link to our Academy. We run all the courses. And if you scroll down just a little bit here, this is where we have our office hours. So I will reply to that message if I can. Reply, it says. I'm going to try that one there. But again, it's not too hard. Academy.viamonstra.com. And a few people have actually asked, what does this even mean? This is just a name that me and my good friend Michael Nystrom came up with a good decade ago when we started to write books together, deployment books, and we needed our own Contoso, so to speak. We needed a fictional company that we can use for all our lab environments and whatnot. So we picked this one. It's Latin, it's 2 words, it's Viam and Monstra, and it basically translates to show me the way. And we thought it was a pretty cool name to have in the environment. So that's the backstory to that one. All right, let's see. Dan is asking, any thoughts on troubleshooting application deployments using during OSD where random app deployments randomly hang, and it may happen very intermediate, like every 2 out of 10 machines imaged. In general, if you start to have, so let me bring up my console here real quick. If I go to a sequence and for example, this one here. And this one is not dark mode yet, it seems. All right, this is very not dark mode. Anyhow, as you know, you can install software in a sequence, that is legacy packages, or you can install applications. And that can either be a list of applications, or it can also be where you simply hard code it and pick and say, all right, I would like to have an application added. If you see intermittent problems with these type of applications, there is very little you can do. There are some retry options you can configure. That usually doesn't help much. It's usually a timing problem between the sequence and the ConfigMgr client. So while I have seen that it may help putting in like download retry counts, etc., in your as a variable, the only real solution to the problem is to switch to legacy packages, because they don't have to go through the client the same way as an application model app would. So we even had customers that had to duplicate several hundred applications they had that were application model apps over to legacy packages to have them go reliable in the sequence. It's simply different how the sequence applies those. Instead of just calling the app and just run the program right away, it may fail when it has to do with application model apps. So again, the best option, if you see problems, switch over to legacy packages and use them instead, whatever they may be. Maybe the answer you wanted, but that's the solution for it. Okay, let's see. Brady is asking on YouTube, single site server, legacy CMG deployment, best way to get to the new supported CMG deployment, which is basically the VM scale set. I have not done a conversion of that. I would assume it would be to delete the one you had and just create a new one that is the scale set. If anyone happened to listen in and know if there is a conversion options between the classic CMD versus the VM scale set, please let me know. You can see what a quick search reveals here. Converting. Well, it looks like Mr. Paul Stanley. I was actually on a call with him just the other week. This may do it. Mr. Paul apparently went through this exercise last year. And as you can see here, starting from 2107, you can convert to a scale set. And if you do a little bit of prep work beforehand, that's doable. So I will definitely share this link for those of you that are here in the Zoom call. When I find the chat, I will do that. And these links will be posted a little bit later together with the video here. So, and if you're not following Paul on Twitter, you should. He has a lot of good information. And while I'm posting links anyway, I'll get to this one as well. All right. Let's see what else we had. Another question coming in on YouTube. This is regarding the escrow recovery key that make it go to the ConfigMgr database instead of the Active Directory database. Do I have any blog and article describing the differences or advantages for that? I have not seen any blogs around it, especially since that feature was just released. Traditionally, the reason you would put escrow keys available in the good old Ambon database was because there were web portals where you can request that key, etc., for help desk to retrieve them. And that is still the case. It's just that it happened later in the process. It's just that Microsoft now added in into the mix. So if you want to use those portals that do exist now in BitLocker management and ConfigMgr, the key at some point have to be in the database. And the beautiful thing about getting it early during MDT is, of course, that they are available there. What organizations did prior to 2103 now being available is that they would upload them to AD first because that was the only option available. And then when the MBAM client settings or BitLocker management settings came in, it would eventually escrow the key into the ConfigMgr database. I can actually show you that setting. I believe I have BitLocker in at least one of my sequences. With all 1909 sequence. Provision. That's the MDT one. We're looking for the native step. Wonder if I have that available. Da, da, da. Well, let's create a sequence with it, shall we? Demo, escrow. Pick a boot image. Perfect. Pick an image. 21H2 will do just fine. Would you like BitLocker? Yes, I do. Showing your domain is probably a good idea. An OU is also a good idea. Account that has permissions to add stuff to the domain would be a good idea. Password. Smart to verify that. Yep. Excellent, 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 excellent. Let's see. Search for lock. Here is my, where did it go? Demo, escrow. Also remembering what you actually name the sequences is a good idea. So this would be the option that is new in 2103 that we can set. So just doing it earlier than like 10, 15, 20 minutes later when the sequence is done. So hopefully I'm asking that or answer that question. A difference to know for those of you coming from the standalone MBAM setup, MBAM did not encrypt the key in the database, so you can just read it if you know which field to read. ConfigMgr BitLocker management actually does encrypt it a little bit. So if you need to extract it from the database, you need to use a PowerShell script to actually decrypt that key. It's not readable in just clear text any longer, so it makes it a little bit harder for someone who gets access to the database to get to those keys. All right. Any other questions? Happy to answer. Don't see any more questions coming in at the moment, but I will give you guys a minute or two to write them down. For those of you who are still thinking about signing up for MMS in Minneapolis in May. I've been told there are still seats open, and this is by far the best conference that you can attend in person. If you're interested in ConfigMgr, Intune, and pretty much anything related to that. Hundreds of sessions with just good stuff. Um, I don't see any more questions. We do have two upcoming mini courses, one in May. They are free, they are for the community. So this is one on peer-to-peer, meaning everything, DO, branch cache, peer cache, Bloodbath, and all the other good stuff that you can do to improve network performance in Microsoft environments. And then we have Mr. Richard Hicks coming back to us to do another run of his always on VPN course that happens in June 14. The price for these guys are just right. You're free to enroll, and that one will last for about an hour and a half on June 14 there. So good stuff coming up on the Academy. And now we actually do have a question coming in. Excellent. For an upgrade, let's see. Okay, so the question is using an in-place upgrade to Windows 10 21H2 using a sequence. Is it a good idea to also add drivers during the process or to separate it? It's a great question, but it's one of those it depends question. Because when working with, so let me open up my favorite tool here, WordPad. Still can start it as write.exe for those of you that might remember the old Windows version. So the scenario is in-place upgrade. I cannot spell today either. Using task sequences to Windows 10 21H2. And in this case, we are assuming that you're coming from a Windows 10 1909, so that you don't, so you can, basically you cannot use an enablement package, which would have been an easy option. So, so from Windows 10 1909 to 21H2. So this is a full in-place upgrade. This is a setup exit-driven process, and the question was about drivers. Your machine will fall into one of four different states in terms of drivers. And in some scenarios, when you're doing this, from a driver's point of view, you may run into that you don't have to do anything at all. And that basically means that whatever was on the box from the beginning will work just fine on the new version of Windows 10. It's rare, but it happens. All right. There are some scenarios where you may have to do update of drivers prior to starting setup.exe. And in this case, it is the sequence that starts setup.exe. And it could be if you're using certain security features like core isolation in Windows 10, for example, that will evaluate drivers before it starts. And if they're not matching what they're supposed to be, it actually breaks the upgrade. And then that can be that you have to update drivers during the upgrade, because you can feed driver packages to the upgrade process. That's a variable that you can set that makes setup actually use those drivers. And the final scenario could be that you may need to remove the drivers prior to starting setup. And this could be the case if you have a vendor that once supported Windows 10 on a model, but they no longer support it. And now Microsoft typically steps in and provides an inbox driver for that for those devices. But for Windows to pick an inbox driver over an older third-party vendor driver, you often have to get rid of that driver. So we usually use PnP util to delete those drivers so that you can force setup to pick up PnP util to get rid of that driver. So I do recommend looking into modern driver management. They make it very, very easy to update drivers. And this is something you can even do way before you do an upgrade. Here I have a sequence. The only thing this sequence does is update drivers. It's a single script that simple you deploy and it will update drivers when there are new drivers available. And it is looking for those drivers in the various ConfigMgr packages that you have created. In this case, a bunch of Dell packages that I had. So that's an elegant solution. The same solution does support also to provide them to the setup. Different switch, but the same script can be used. So yeah, good stuff. Challenge I put this is that you typically cannot go to a vendor website and tell the vendor, okay, I have these 3 models here. I'm about to go from Windows 10 this to Windows 10 that. What do I need to do? They don't simply have that matrix of information. So it's usually up to you guys to test your various models to figure out, okay, for this model, what do I need to do? Okay, you were lucky, you don't have to do anything. Okay, these 4 models, okay, you actually have to provide drivers to them for them to work reliably. And this is not just for sequences. This is something you may have to do also when doing servicing using service plans. It's one of those, it depends on the hardware. And to add some complexity to that, these days it can also involve BIOS updates and TPM management, where you need to be on a certain BIOS version for a certain version of Windows to actually function. And in the Windows 11 case, it also now TPM versions. Windows 10 happily accepts the TPM whatever version. Windows 11 is a little bit picky about that. And also here in the United States, recently TSA started to mandate certain companies that are responsible for infrastructure in the country to do update of drivers and update of BIOS, update of TPM chips more frequently. Otherwise, they'll be basically be given a hefty fine for not doing it. But yeah, a long ramble to a short question, but this is what you have to deal with for any type of servicing. For scenarios where you don't have to do an in-place upgrade, where you need to go from, say, Windows 10 28.1 up to, whoops, I did not mean to type that, up to this, you don't have to run setup. This is just a traditional EKB, as they're being called, but an enablement package. And typically you don't have to worry about BIOS or drivers when going from this to this, because it's essentially the same version of Windows. You're just enabling different features that have been coming down through software updates earlier. So this takes like 2 minutes, reboot done. Whereas a full, as I like to call them, in-place upgrade that is driven by setup, that will take you an hour and a half, or up to an hour and a half. So let's see, other questions coming in. Do you have any examples of conditional access in Intune for blocking Outlook and team access from the browser? I do not. My partner in crime here at the Academy, Andrew Johnson, he has spent a stupid amount of time with conditional access. He might have an idea. I noticed you were on LinkedIn there. If you just drop me a message, I'll see if I can ask and find out. It's not something I have tried myself. Braid is asking if I recommend using Adaptiva as an alternate content provider. Well, these days I'm a little bit biased, to say the least. I work for two companies these days. Uh, I work for this little company here, Tupan Software, which builds extensions to ConfigMgr to optimize the native peer-to-peer stack that Microsoft offers. So like branch cache and peer cache and delivery optimization. So this is what I work mostly these days. But in general, I would say that peer-to-peer as a concept is of good. There are just different vendors that provides it to the platform. So this is what I recommend using native Microsoft technologies in the bottom and then a management layer on top of it. But there are other great solutions out there as well. I have used many of them in the past. I just haven't done it in the recent years. What I do know is that there is one native stack that you cannot get rid of, and that would be delivery optimizations or delivery optimization. This little friend is usually responsible these days for 50 to 60% of all downloads, or responsible for, I guess it's a better word. And ConfigMgr just 30%, 40% in the environment. And there are no third-party options for this. It can be managed, yes, but there is no third-party replacement for these downloads. So if you pick a third-party vendor to work with for ConfigMgr stuff, you still have to deal with Windows stuff for this. And this is where our company come in and offers management layers on top of it. Yeah, so I hope I answered that. All right. Any other questions? I mean, by all means, if you guys are interested to see what you can do with just Windows components in terms of bringing performance up in not just ConfigMgr, but also Intune, because Intune is also using delivery optimization for a lot of its stuff. For example, all Win32 apps in Intune are coming down using this protocol. And you can do a lot of things to make this one better. I have posted some stuff over the years. Search for delivery on my blog. I have group policy recommendations for Windows 10 and Windows 11 for DO. They are also valid for config manager as well as non-config manager environments. Put that link in the chat for you guys. Something we have been sharing quite frequently here in the office hours section. And then I also wrote a blog post on our blog that we are maintaining. Here's an internals to delivery optimization, but this is the Intune recommendations. So I'll put that link in the chat. For those of you who had arrived late, all these links are posted on the Academy site under the office hours section. But here are the Intune settings that I recommend. And if you do these settings, you can typically see an improvement from, say, 5 to 10% efficiency up to 60 to 80% efficiency. And we are talking about reduction in traffic over internet and over WAN links and other things like that. So good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Anything else? We have a whopping 21 minutes to our disposal. Well, if there are no more questions, friendly reminder that we will be back next week, um, same times today. We're going to have a break at the MMS conference because it turns out that I will actually be up on the stage presenting at the same time the week following April 27, and that kind of makes it a little bit harder to stream this session or stream this event here. So thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you for the many good questions, and I hope to see you guys same time next week. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you. All right.